All right, we just touched on one of the rookie quarterbacks. Leger, you wanted to touch on the other three here. What was your deep dive?
When you look at it, all three rookie quarterbacks have a winning record currently through week 5. And just talking about their setups and why they're having success. And we've had this discussion before, Kyle. Like, I think a lot of people going into the season was like, Caleb Williams is going into the best scenario any former number one quarterback has gone into, right? And the situation you go into matters. Right. We'll start with Caleb Williams. Obviously, top tier defense. I think a lot of people tend to forget that because of all the aura around Caleb Williams. And that was my thing with him. And we talked about this at Lentz on Spotlight. Like, if you're Caleb Williams, we know you're accustomed to being Superman at USC. You had to because your defense gave you no help. That's not the case in Chicago. Like, you can lean on that defense, right? And I love what Shane Waldron has done is starting to lean into DeAndre Swift a little bit more. It's like, you paid this dude and you didn't want to use him the first couple of weeks of the season. Like, it's not about always the amount of rush yards you have. It's the attempts. We always talk about that in the locker room is one of the goals. Like, you want to
get to 25, 30 carries.
30 carries, exactly, right? Because that weighs on the defense and it also keeps them honest as well. And then another thing that Caleb Williams realized is I have a true number one guy in DJ Moore. They started getting him the ball the last 2 weeks. And look at it. The Chicago offense has been more explosive, right? That's what happens when you get it to a true playmaker. And then the offensive line has done a better job. I think they've done some things where they've kept the tight end in protection, and it's actually helped Caleb Williams as well. And then we go to Jaden Daniels. Okay, he's the outlier, right? When you look at what he's done, being able to complete 77% of your passes, and before last week it was 84. Like, that's an outlier. Like, him and CJ Stroud, I think too many teams get into this fixation of like, oh, we could draft CJ Stroud or Jay. What they're doing is astronomical. Like, that's the exception, not
rogue
the rule.
waves. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the exception, not the rule. But also Dan Quinn being his head coach, like that defense, you assume that they would eventually come on, and they've played really well the last 2 weeks. I think only giving up 27 points the last
They've
2
played
games.
above their weight class.
Correct, right? But that's what Dan Quinn does. Like, he gets the most out of players. I've been telling everybody, Frankie Louvu, watch out for this guy. Like, he was going to use him like Micah Parsons, and you're starting to see that. 2.5 sacks this last week versus the Cleveland Browns. I think he pairs really well with Bobby Wagner. Now, they still have some issues at the cornerback position, and I'm assuming next year they'll address those. But if they can continue to get the production that they're getting from Jayden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury, who's done a masterful job, and we're talking about Jayden Daniels, talk about the run game from Washington. 38 carries on Sunday. And they have a 3-headed monster now. Like, Jeremy McNichols has been balling these last couple of weeks. I love how inventive Cliff Kingsbury has been. 2 back sets, they'll put Austin Eckler out, and they'll give him a speed sweep with Brian Robinson in the backfield. Like, I just love when I see inventiveness from the offensive coordinator, and that's why Jaden Daniels and the Commanders are having success. And then Drake May, the total opposite. The defense has carried them, but that's okay, right? Just don't go out there and lose games.
Don't lose the game.
Continue to develop, right? So it's like these rookie quarterbacks have had success in different manners, but it's all about the situations they're in, right, and how they're set up to have success. And even with Denver, they're not running the ball a ton, but they're getting the carries in and keeping it honest. I love that they got Javonte Williams involved in the pass game. I've been waiting for that because I think he is a true 3-down back. They finally did that this last week versus the Raiders, and it's helped Bo Nix. He's been able to get out the pocket, make some plays with his legs. He's been efficient. He's not throwing the ball down the field, but he's being efficient and moving the chain. So I think that's why all three of these guys are having success. And to Mike's point, he thought this was one of the best quarterback classes, that we've seen in a while. And these three guys are proving that it is right now. We'll see what Drake May does. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy was hurt. Penix is probably not going to see the field for a year or two. But so far, this rookie class has been a home run so far. And it's because of the situations they're in with their teams.
And all the situations are different, right, Mike? Yes. And I think about Caleb Williams and the situation he came into, and it's great from a skill player standpoint. They were fixing and figuring out that offensive line roster, and we saw a guy last week, Bill Murray, come in when Tevin Jenkins goes down, plays really well relative to being a backup. And then I think about, but he's got a defensive coach. And
Correct.
To your point about their defense, that's really the identity of this football team.
For sure.
Everybody wants to talk about Caleb, but it's the defense. It's the old school monsters of the Midway. They're getting after it. They're progressing. And even up front, they're getting better. Your favorite player, Javon Dexter Sr. is having pretty
good. He is balling this year.
But then I think about Jaden Daniels. And to your point, another defensive head coach, that calming presence, that ability to get your offense to understand that the defense is going to do their part. And Cliff Kingsbury, I really feel like the key word is confidence, instilling confidence in Jayden Daniels and the things that they're able to do with a group that's really lackluster on paper on the offensive line. They have ran the ball effectively. Yeah. Usually coaches, when they don't have dominant O-linemen, they're afraid to run the football because then you get off schedule, you waste it down. Now your quarterback's dealing with 2nd and 8 as opposed to 2nd and 5, or 3rd and 8 as opposed to 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4. And then I think about Bo Nix and the situation he's in, and who better to inherit a rookie quarterback than Sean Payton.
Bueller.
And they've got Bueller. And by the way, Bo Nix is becoming a social media star after the comments.
I saw that.
After the comments Sean Payton said about Bueller, he went out and released a good cut up, a little montage, Ferris Bueller, Bo Nix highlight. I like the vibe there in Denver. And to your point, the goal is just don't lose the game for Bo Nix. And I like what he's done getting out of the pocket. It's a lot of fun. Mike, I'm not sure what you've seen, but the situations, they're all different, and they all play to the strengths of these different guys.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that Bo Nix and Jayden Daniels were unique prospects in that 5 years as starters is like unheralded in college football history, right? Like they got the COVID year, they took advantage of it, and their draft stocks reflected that. If they had to both only play 4 years, those guys are late day 2 to early day 3 picks. They are not top 15 picks, but you saw the advancement over their collegiate careers and then the big year 5s they had where they were just on a different level. And then with both of them, they went to OCs that were just tailor-made for them. So we're seeing unique situations in that. What Jayden Daniels' strengths and weaknesses were, I think Cliff Kingsbury has done just a masterful job of playing to. He's super accurate underneath. He has one of the best go balls in the NFL, if not of like any prospect I've ever seen. And you watch that offense, and it's just timing, crush underneath, low to sleep, go ball on the outside. And it's just like 60-yard play. And you're just like, where'd that come from? But it's because Jayden Daniels has that. And then they're utilizing his running threat as well. And then with Sean Payton, Bo Nix, it was one that I even remember after I watched his tape at the end of the year, final eval on Bo Nix, I'm like, I'm going to put him to the Broncos in every single mock draft. Yeah. It's just like,
it made too much sense.
That was what he did at Oregon was basically what Drew Brees was doing in New Orleans for a decade plus. It was just the guy can diagnose quickly at the snap where the defense is going and get to that underneath wide receiver, whichever ball where it needs to go quickly. Now, maybe he's inaccurate when he starts pushing the ball down the football field, but he still will do that at times, just enough to keep you honest, to keep that underneath passing game going. So really those two went to perfect situations in terms of just strengths, weaknesses to the OCs. And that's why I think you're seeing them even over the course of from like week 1 to now. It's just like every single week they get more on their plate, and every single week it just looks better. And then with Caleb Williams, I don't think they necessarily that offense is tailor-made to his strengths just yet. We're still trying to figure out exactly, and I think they're getting better at it. But he went to a situation where those 3 wide receivers get open. They flat out that's what we said is one of the best situations rookie quarterbacks ever stepped into, is because when he does have time, there will be guys open. Just flat out, there will be. And I think they've realized in recent weeks, we don't need to get 5 guys out in a route. We need to keep Caleb upright for 3 seconds. We get Caleb upright for 3 seconds, we have a big play. If we don't, it doesn't matter how many guys are open right after the snap. He's not going to be able to find them. We're getting too much pressure. So I think that's the biggest thing that we've seen. And then Caleb just having to go from all of it on his plate every single week at USC, win us a game every single week, to now, hey, you have the luxury of, if nothing's there, you don't have to force it. You don't have to take these sacks. You can dirt it. You can survive, and the defense will give you chances. So I do think all those guys stepped into great situations. Now, we can't say the same about Drake May, but I think we can say the same about a guy like J.J. McCarthy, and probably the same about Michael Penix, in that when Penix does take over, we'll see when that ends up happening. Right now, though, they do have the pieces in place there in terms of the weapons in Atlanta to make him successful. So it was a unique quarterback class, and it's really, I think, lived up to the hype. It lived up. They look good in preseason.
They're all going to hit.
Didn't look great week 1, but they've looked great ever since. It's lived up to the hype for sure.
That was nice, Lijay. Thanks for doing that. Any opportunity we get to show Caleb Williams love, we do that. Right,